to hear what Glenn Greenwald. So he was interviewed recently on Fox talking about gatekeepers. So we've had a lot of discussion recently about gatekeepers. Ice Cube talked about gatekeepers in politics. And now Glenn Greenwald is talking about gatekeepers in reference to the media. So shout out to Case Study QB here for this clip. Case Study QB says Glenn Greenwald discussing media gatekeepers and liberals who want to suppress RFK Jr.'s reach. Listen to this. It's 2 clips. So let's start with this one first.
Now joining us is Glenn Greenwald, Pulitzer Prize-winning independent journalist. Glenn, great to see you back on the show. Now, you'd think that if the elites were so confident that they were on the right side of the, let's just say, the vaccine issue, that they'd have no problem debating, confronting, whatever you want to call it, RFK Jr. So what are they so afraid of?
Yeah, I hope you're doing okay after this dangerous man with his dangerous ideas was allowed to be heard on television. I know how threatening that might be. It's really amazing, Laura. This is somebody who is a presidential candidate, whether you like it or not, who's polling at 20%. That means millions of people in the Democratic Party say they intend to vote for him for president. And this inclination on the part of people who teach journalism or who call themselves journalists to say that he ought not to be heard from, he ought not to be challenged, he ought not to be engaged is shocking in one way, but in another way, the liberal establishment in the United States has now explicitly adopted the view that people they disagree with aren't people who are wrong, but people who are so beyond the pale that they can't be heard from. And this is just an expression of that really dangerous mindset.
Now, let's pause here for a second. Let's go back because there's something he pointed out about the journalist. And then we'll get to the second clip as well.
On television, I know how threatening that might be. It's really amazing, Laura. This is somebody who is a presidential candidate, whether you like it or not, who's polling at 20%. That means millions of people in the Democratic Party say they intend to vote for him for president. And this inclination on the part of people who teach journalism or who call themselves journalists to say that he ought not to be heard from, he ought not to be challenged, he ought not to be engaged is shocking in one way, but in another way, the liberal establishment in the United States has now explicitly adopted the view that people they disagree with aren't people who are wrong, but people who are so beyond the pale that they can't be heard from. And this is just an expression of that really dangerous mindset.
The gatekeepers. You have them in different industries. In journalism and in media, they can be the worst. Okay, let me tell you what this looks like. I think that when we talk about media gatekeepers, for example, they will go to such lengths to make sure that certain people are not heard from. So they'll shut them out. They'll blackball them. That's what's happening to RFK Jr. on certain outlets, right? Like they're making sure that we don't want to talk to that guy. Some people are really upset because of the fact that News Nation actually gave him a town hall. And so some people don't like that. But to me, I was just kind of like, then maybe you should have gave him the town hall. You know, it's just, I don't get this. I don't understand these things. It's like, if you don't want to hear what he has to say, then just don't watch it. But to have this idea that he shouldn't even be allowed to speak and to have a town hall, but Joe Biden should when he can barely talk and he can barely stand at this point in time. What does that tell you about the establishment narrative? So this is important for people to understand. This type of gatekeeping doesn't just happen with presidential candidates. This type of gatekeeping happens with anyone who goes against the established narrative and the narrative that has been approved by the State Department. So that is why there are certain journalists that you will never see on certain outlets. You won't see people like Max Blumenthal on certain outlets, not necessarily because he doesn't want to go there, but because they refuse to have him on. Don't bring that voice on this show. No, no, no. We don't want people to hear what he's saying over there. And he's just one of them. But there are many, many more. Wyatt Reed, Fiorella Isabel, right? People don't want to hear from Tara Reid. They go against the State Department talking points. So that's what they'll do. So what they'll do is they'll shut those people out in an effort to silence them But what has happened is that independent media, in so many ways, they've kind of taken up that mantle and said, okay, if the mainstream media outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC and also, well, Fox News kind of will bring on anybody. But if they really don't want to hear from you, then I'm going to let you come on to the independent outlet and we're going to let people hear from you. And what has happened is that you have some of these outlets like Rumble that's really taken off, like for some people like Russell Brand, Kim Iverson, Glenn Greenwald, their shows are huge on Rumble. So you may get blackballed from CNN, but if you go onto Russell Brand's show, you can still get your message out to a lot of people. And that's important for people to know. So this type of gatekeeping, it happens, but I want you to understand it doesn't just happen with politicians. It happens with anyone that goes against that established narrative that the State Department has approved.
Now, Glenn, other than the vaccines, the other reason that he's persona non grata, they want to deplatform him, is that he has some, unconventional things to say about the war in Ukraine.
We have neglected many opportunities to settle this war peacefully. Myself and my family are very, very sympathetic to the Ukrainian people. I think the way that we have conducted the war is bad for the Ukrainian people, is terrible for the Ukrainian people.
Now, the Democrats are really going to want to shut him up now, right, after that comment.
I think that's the main reason, actually. I don't think they care about the vaccine issue. I think they're promoting that because they think that is what will discredit him. I think what they're most worried about are two things. The fact that he is a Democrat, the only one standing up and saying Joe Biden's war policy is wrong and dangerous and is actually not helping the Ukrainian people, but destroying the country of Ukraine for our own benefit or for the benefit of a tiny number of arms dealers.
Oh, and then we're going to go to the second one. Whoops. Sorry. Cuts it short there, but here we go.
People that the health establishment during the COVID pandemic lied and got a huge amount wrong, not about vaccines exclusively, but about things like the origin of the pandemic, about the efficacy of masks, about so many things that they got wrong shutting schools. And that's what they're really worried about. I think the vaccine is just a pretext to use to try and destroy him and then use those other things as the real reason they don't want him heard from.
Yeah, I agree with that. And then the other thing too is that it doesn't seem like the rhetoric that's been used against RFK Jr. in reference to the pandemic is actually working the way that they thought it would. Most people don't care. Most people don't care, especially like, look, let's just keep it real. If you go to the hood and you talk to people and say, hey, you know, that RFK Jr. guy, I don't know about him because his views on the pandemic, most people in the hood are going to be like, number one, are going to be like, who? Or number two, are going to be like, who gives a fuck? Most people are not gonna, I'm sorry, but it's the reality. Most people in the hood, most people in working class communities or poor communities are like, what and who and why? Who cares? Most people don't give a fuck. So who are they relating that message to? Who are they telling that message to? They're speaking to the professional, managerial class people who are in spaces where these certain liberal outlets are seen as truth tellers. They're speaking to the people who work at the Goldman Sachs, the people who work at Harvard, the people who are lawyers, the people who are doctors, the people who are other politicians, who are judges. Like they're speaking to those people. And some of the college graduates, some of the college students, some of the ones that are in the grad programs, the PhD students, the professors, they're speaking to those people. They're not speaking to working class people. Working class people don't care about this shit. I'm sorry, working class people do not care about this. They're not even talking about this. It's just the reality of the situation.
Glenn, and another pretty interesting thing about RFK is he's not necessarily dogmatic on the issues that deliver a reflexive response from most Democrats. Issues like what's going on at the southern border. Watch this.
I was against Trump's wall. But having seen it down there, I see that you were required to give a physical barrier during certain highly densely populated areas. You need a physical barrier. No nation can survive if they can't protect their borders.
Glenn, I mean, he's finding some nuance, some, wiggle room there for maybe some type of compromise or moving closer to actually we have to enforce our border, that viewpoint. And that's outrageous for the Democrats.
This is the thing I was most struck by, Laura, when I interviewed him, was he's a politician with a very rare attribute, which he has a completely open mind, including about things that he previously believed that he's willing to say were wrong. There were things, for example, he said that he used to believe in Russiagate. Now he realizes he was propagandized by a fraud. There were even things in the middle of the interview that I questioned him about a little bit aggressively, and he said, you know what, maybe you're right about that, and I'm wrong. And the issue about immigration is an incredibly good example because a lot of Democrats do care about the crisis at the border. They pretended to care under Trump, where no one talks about the border anymore, but he's somebody who's really coming forward, I think, a way that will appeal to a lot of people and say, I'm not tied to dogma, as you say, I'm willing to be open-minded and find pragmatic solutions independent of ideology. And I think more than anything,
let's just pause here for a second. I'm going to come back. Let's pause here for a second and talk about the immigration issue. Remember, RFK Jr. is running as a Democrat. And the last thing I think the DNC wants is someone on the debate stage who is a Democrat in a Democrat primary actually urging for to continue some type of a border wall. That's the last thing they want for people to hear. They're going to be like, oh, no, that's what the Republicans are supposed to say. So I don't think they really want that message on the stage at all. And I also don't think they want the message that RFK Jr. has about this war, like stopping the war with Russia and Ukraine, getting out of these wars just in general. They don't want people to hear that, because if you hear someone say that and they're running through the Democratic Party, then that kind of makes you question the party a little bit. And you start looking at it in a way like, hey, actually, didn't you guys used to have that position? Didn't the Democratic Party used to feel that same way? They don't want that message to get out. Now, when you talk about media and these journalists gatekeeping people, one of the things I do want to add is that it does also happen in independent media as well. There's also people in independent media that won't bring some of these people on, that won't bring RFK Jr. on because they don't want people to hear this message, right? Or if they do bring them on, it's only to scold them and to try to destroy them so that their viewers won't even think about entertaining, supporting him as a candidate. There's a lot of gatekeeping that happens like all around. If you pay attention, you can probably figure it out. There's a reason why there's certain people you never see on this show. And it's not because I don't invite them. It's because they don't want to be associated with what I have to say. The same vice versa. There's a reason why you don't see me on other shows, because they don't want to be associated with what I have to say. So I think that, again, if you are strong in your message and you believe what you're saying and you're able to argue your message to a convincing point, then you shouldn't be afraid of hearing what someone else is saying, whether it's on your platform or another platform. And that's just how I look at it. If you're strong and confident about what you believe and what you're saying, then you shouldn't be afraid to engage and have that discussion. And I really do believe, in reference to this situation with RFK Jr., I don't think a lot of these networks, these outlets, are strong and confident within their position.
I think a way that will appeal to a lot of people and say, I'm not tied to dogma, as you say, I'm willing to be open-minded and find pragmatic solutions independent of ideology. And I think more than anything, that's what a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, common sense, just plain old common sense. Glenn, it's great to see you tonight. Thanks.
So that's a good point that people need to hear. It's like, if you
don't
echo those same like talking points of the establishment Democrat, right, then you're kind of seen as they don't want to engage with you. They don't really want to hear. They want other people to hear what you have to say. It's almost like you do have to go along in order to get along, right? And we had those voices before. We had those voices from people who I now call regressives, who are in Congress, that they had different points of view, but you notice how they were subdued once they became a part of that party. Natalie says, I've never made even $20 an hour. No wonder I couldn't afford to move out. Yeah, it's very telling. It's very telling. Yes, Roger. Thank you for the super chat. You're doing a show Tuesday, July 4th, Sab. Yes, because July 4th is on a Tuesday. I'm actually going to fireworks on Monday. I'm not going on a Tuesday. The big fireworks that a lot of people go to here is in Boston, and it's a nightmare, like it's a nightmare trying to get back from there on the 4th. So what some people will do is they'll go to other areas for fireworks, typically the day before, where it's not as crowded. Plus, I've done the Boston fireworks thing like multiple times. But yeah, I'll be here Tuesday, July 4th. I'll be celebrating the day before. So you shall see me. Thank you for the super chat, Buds Not Bombs. You'll live in a van, eat bugs, but you'll be happy. You'll be living in a van down by the river. Thank you for the super chat, a kid. Sabby Cornell West needs to get out there to push his message on mainstream media. He's doing it on independent media, but needs more eyes and ears on him. He's been on mainstream media a couple times already. He was on Fox. He was on CNN. I think he was also on MSNBC, and I think he was on Fox as well. So he actually, mainstream media covered him from the jump. So he's been on there. I'll take the comment on Rockfin. Eric, thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Run CBI's amending state constitutions, a minimum law that says minimum wage that permanently sets the minimum wage 20% above housing. Offer tax subsidies to small and medium-sized businesses to offer subsidies to cover 85% to 100% of labor cost.